Thanks very much, Tony. That is today's News on 3. I'm Hilary Barry.
And I'm Mike McRoberts, and now it's Campbell Live.
On the show tonight, trouble on the line. New Zealand pays much more than other countries for mobile phone calls. So, are we getting ripped off? And why is our broadband internet so slow? Some Asian countries are 8 times faster, for example. We've got Telecom Chief Teresa Gatting and Communications Minister David Cunliffe to explain. G'day everyone, Heidi Mai, welcome to the show. It's Wednesday, the 22nd of February. Tonight, cell phone calls and broadband internet. Why is the former so expensive and why is the latter falling so far behind the rest of the OECD? Now, we should begin tonight by pointing out the obvious. This program is sponsored by Telecom. Sponsorship is another form of advertising. Telecom wanted such exposure to our audience and they negotiated a deal with our sales department to get it. We were not involved in those negotiations in any way. None of the money has gone to our program and the sponsorship deal involves no editorial control, no editorial input, indeed no editorial influence of any sort at all. Now, tonight, Telecom will be at the centre of our considerations, and that's because its size, its position and its history place it at the very heart of a major issue facing our country. Are we as good as we could be and should be in the area of telecommunications? Why are our cell phone calls so expensive? Why is our broadband so slow? Let's begin with a brief but pertinent history. Until 1987, what's now called Telecom was part of New Zealand Post. Government-owned, government-protected, a state-backed monopoly with no competitors. In 1987, Telecom was split from New Zealand Post. In 1990, it was sold, bought by 2 American companies for $4.25 billion. They subsequently sold it for a huge profit. But part of what they bought, and this is vitally important, was a thing called the local loop. The local loop is the copper wire connection into your home or business. And owning that meant Telecom had an advantage over all other competitors. They were in your business or your house, and no one else was. So any new players had 2 choices. They could build a whole new local loop at huge expense, completely replicating the one that was already there, or they could be wholesalers, buying access off Telecom and on-selling it to you. No one has built a whole new national local loop. In other words, competition in the New Zealand market is defined and restricted by the very simple fact that the loop, the access to your home or your business, is still fundamentally Telecom's. But what about cell phones, I hear you ask? Good question. There is competition there, obviously. But we begin tonight with Phil Vine and another question. If there's competition, why are our cell phone calls so very, very expensive?
As if we didn't have enough cell phone towers.
We've got the south side of the university covered. I think that's going to be a great site.
These guys are poised to bring a 3rd cell phone network to the country.
But hey, they're promising to cut the price of mobile calls in half. Currently, New Zealand consumers are paying almost 3 times more per call than their European counterpart. It's easy to understand that mobile phone calls could be at least 50% cheaper, possibly 70% cheaper.
Begging the question, why on earth are we paying so much for our mobile calls now?
About $150 a month. Yeah, it's a business account, so it's getting up there now, yeah.
What is it in London? What do you pay? You pay a lot cheaper.
£30 a month.
£30 a month?
Yeah, 200 free minutes and free text.
According to the Commerce Commission, in 2004, New Zealanders paid the 2nd highest prices for mobile airtime in the whole OECD, 60 to 70% more than average. But what about competition? You've all seen the adverts. Aren't Telecom and Vodofone locked in deadly combat?
Telecom's 24/7 $10 text.
It's a complete comedy show. It's an absolute pillow fight, and all the marketing nonsense is a facade of the illusion of price competition.
Well, I wish it was. If you know, if you look at it today, then You just have to look at mobile customers. There's more and more joining the market, getting better and better value, and prices, if you look at it, are coming down by 10 to 15% per annum.
Tex Edwards claims high mobile charges are resulting in massive revenues, especially for Vodafone.
We only need to examine Vodafone New Zealand's accounts in a forensic manner to understand that Vodafone is making approximately $1 billion free cash a year in New Zealand.
$1 billion?
That's 1.1 billion is our internal Econet estimate of Vodafone's New Zealand profitability.
Well, I think our latest result showed a number of 187, and I would welcome Econet to show us how it would make $1 billion.
More than one critic has accused Vodafone and Telecom of operating a cosy arrangement, pretending to compete but cooperating to keep new players out.
Well, if you look at Vodafone, we've always been a challenger. We came into New Zealand, that's what we do, is go and compete aggressively in the marketplace. So whether it's another entrant now or in the future, then bring it on. We're very used to it.
We'll move the cell site into the pub.
Tex Edwards says the lack of competition is all about road rules. That we didn't adopt OECD-style regulations when Roger Douglas and co. privatised Telecom.
As a consequence, the industry developed in a distorted and monopolistic manner, and as a consequence now, in the mid-00s, consumers are overpaying.
He says a textbook used at the London School of Economics describes our telecommunications regulations as a case study of what not to do.
New Zealand has become a bit of a laughing stock in terms of its road rules on networked industries.
Ireland, Tex points out, is of a similar size to us, yet they support 3 different mobile networks, with a 4th under construction. We have only 2.
Since 2000, when the government opened up the market, we've been expecting competitors from Australia and around the world to enter, but they haven't.
Well, Econet's having a go, with a pilot network being built in Auckland in the first half of this year. But they say nationwide coverage can only happen if the government brings its regulations in line with the OECD. If that doesn't happen, Tex says he's off to Ethiopia or Congo, where he says the regulations are better thought out.
Phil Vine, right, that's a background on mobile phones for the time being. Now on to the internet, broadband internet. By 2010, our government wants the number of people using broadband in New Zealand to put us in the top quarter of OECD countries. Why do they care? Because fast, affordable access to the internet is considered a key driver of economic success. So how are we doing? Well, not very well. At the moment, we're stuck in the bottom third of OECD rankings, 22nd out of 30 countries for the last 3 years. Why? Critics say it's down to one company, Telecom, and the way it controls access to the internet because it owns the key network, local loop or copper wire network we talked about in the intro this evening. Sure, there are other technologies available, but they've yet to really challenge Telecom's dominant position. Simon Shepherd talks to the critics of Telecom about the state of our broadband.
Okay, let's pretend for the moment that I'm New Zealand and this garden hose is our fastest internet connection. 2 megabits a second, just about to go up to 3.5 megabits a second. Sounds impressive until you see this guy. This fireman could be Finland, similar-sized country, but with a top speed of 12 megabits per second, 4 times faster. And even that's slow compared to other countries who use the same technology to get speeds 8 times faster than us. And that sort of thing really annoys Ernie from the Telecommunication Users Association. So who controls our speed?
Oh, Telecom does.
And how do they control that speed?
They set that depending on the amount of investment they put into the network and the way in which they configure their system.
Why are our speeds slow compared to the rest of the world?
Because of the lack of competition.
Another thing that annoys people is that many countries don't charge for the data that you use through your connection, but we have data caps, and if you go over your data cap, you either pay for it or your internet service provider jumps on your fast connection. So how can Telecom set the speed, the price and the data caps? Imagine this road is the copper wire phone network that goes into every house. This is how the majority of us can get broadband. As Telecom owns the network, it can dictate not only how fast you go, but what sort of car you can drive and what it will cost. Why should we care about slow internet speeds?
Oh, because it's a major break now on our economic development. You know, we have 500 members at Two Hands. I'm mingling with them daily. They are telling me that it's slowing down the growth of their business, putting real constraints on them.
But hang on, you say, there's other internet providers like Orcon, iHug and Slingshot.
I can't save Mike here, but I can save him here.
Why can't they set the speed? Well, they use the same copper network.
If I want to negotiate to provide broadband to my customers, I have one option, and that is Telecom.
Some people, like Lisa, claim the way Telecom protects this internet access is anti-competitive. Lisa runs a transcription service where she emails work out to staff around the country and they turn it around in 4 hours.
We are expanding, and which is great. It's fantastic. The downside is because we're moving premises, on the date that we actually move, Telecom's cutting off our broadband, of course, naturally, but they won't reinstall it for us for 7 to 10 days because we're with another ISP. That means that I would lose my business.
Lisa's complained to the Commerce Commission and tried to move to her brother's house to set up a temporary broadband connection. But it's proved too hard, and Lisa now says she's joined up with Telecom's extra service because she can get it connected on time to keep her business going.
I'm just disappointed that it's come down to the point where I've got no choice.
Telecom says Lisa should never have been told she'd have a quicker connection if she was with Extra. It's looking into the case and would be happy to reconnect Lisa to her original ISP. Critics say there's only one way to stop this, and that's bring in competition. Let's go back to our example where cars represent traffic on Telecom's copper wire network. At the moment, Telecom sets the speed, the type of car and the price. But if you do what the industry calls unbundling the local loop, that's letting other companies have access to the road, then you get competition. Different cars, different speeds, different prices. And the only other OECD country that hasn't done this is Mexico.
Unbundling the local loop is something that the rest of the world has done. And I think they've done it for a good reason. You know, Simon, they've analysed all the economic outcomes of that decision and they have all gone down that path. We didn't. And what's happened? Nothing.
Annette Presley likes to compare our situation with Australia. Their average internet speeds aren't any better than here, but they have unbundled their loop, which means more choice and faster speeds becoming available.
Today, we live in an environment where we are constrained by Telecom. Do you really think it's Telecom's role to have the social conscience of New Zealand? I don't think it is.
Telecom is rolling out new speed and pricing plans from April, which should mean savings for businesses especially. And according to the Minister of Economic Development, our entry-level broadband prices rank well around the world. And Telecom is introducing new technology that will be able to bring faster speeds. But again, critics say all this is an attempt to avoid the government stepping in. How far behind the rest of the world are we?
Hard to say, probably 3 to 5 years. You know, this market is growing exponentially. The faster speeds people get, the more they want. And we are way behind that.
Ernie Newman from Two Hands, the group who represent telecom users, telecommunications users. Simon Shepherd was the reporter. So what does Telecom have to say about its policies on mobile pricing and, most importantly, we think, broadband access? We'll be speaking with the company CEO, Teresa Gatting, after the break. Also promoting competition in telecommunications. How's the government going to make it better for consumers? We'll be putting that to the Minister later.
The things he'll do to fix his karma.
Telecom and Campbell Live, keeping you in touch.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's not muck around. Telecom CEO is, of course, Teresa Gatting. She joins us now. Thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Good evening.
Nice to see you. I want to try and paraphrase what we've heard and read and been told over the past few days. And I think let's look at what people regard as the most meaningful stuff in terms of its overall impact on New Zealand. They say you guys are anti-competitive and that you still enjoy the fruits of an antiquated monopoly, particularly in terms of your control of the local loop.
Well, this is all about broadband, and we agree that broadband is important in terms of New Zealand's growth, and we share the government's goal of affordable broadband for all Kiwis. And it's happening. Broadband's available right across New Zealand. Anybody can get it. It's growing fast. Customer numbers have doubled in the last 12 months. We overachieved our goal of getting it into 250,000 Kiwi households by December. In the last 6 months, nearly half that growth has come from our competitors. Prices are falling, speeds are going up. Independent benchmarking says that our new packages are in the top 10 pricing in OECD.
Okay.
Now, for $1.50 a day, John, you can buy the Herald. For $1 a day, you can get broadband, access to the whole world.
Yeah, for $1 a day, you can get broadband as long as you don't use it too much, because you're going to hit your very low caps. For example, if I watch a film for about 1 hour 50, my whole month's worth is gone. Now, you know this, and you're very clever at the sort of sophistry and semantics of it. But actually, if you compare us to the OECD, you're not very good value for money.
That's not true.
The caps come in low.
Internationally, independent benchmarking shows that, in fact, we stack up very well against the OECD.
Okay, well, let's look
Even last year, it was 6th best for entry-level residential broadband pricing.
In terms of pricing?
In terms of, yes.
Cheap prices, cheap service.
No, New Zealanders have a very high-quality service. Whether it's dial-up internet or broadband, we offer a very high-quality service.
OK, well, let's look at some of the things. Let's look at data caps. Why are your data caps so low? And I need to explain that to people. When you subscribe to the broadband, you're allowed to download so much information. Once you've hit the limit, you have to either download less at a slower rate or pay more. Now, you guys kick in lower than just about anyone in the OECD.
Look, data caps are common. They're typical in Australia and New Zealand. And
but they're very low.
That's because the content comes out of America. If you live in Australia and New Zealand, you have to pay to get the data transported from America to this part of the world.
Across the Pacific.
Across the ocean.
So how do you explain Japan, for example, that has no data caps whatsoever at about the same price level as yours?
Like several 100 million more people. You know, there's a scale issue in this.
What about contention rates? Now, I probably need to explain that to people. That is that under your new plan, you're going to get, what, 3.5?
Well, what we're doing is we're actually giving everyone who's on 256 today an automatic upgrade to 2 meg.
Yeah.
And if you're on 2 meg to 3.5, so 10 times faster than what you've been getting.
But you're potentially going to be sharing that with 148 other people. As Paul Brisland said in Computer World magazine, it's like being on the world's biggest party line.
Look, when you drive a car in a motorway at the moment, you don't always make the trip in the same time frame. If there's a lot of other cars on the road, you go slower than if you're there by yourself. Our contention ratios, the actual quality of our service is right up with anywhere else in the world.
It's not. You know full well that in Britain it's 50 to 1. You know full well that the international standard is 80 to 1. You guys are 148 to 1.
Look, the quality of what people are receiving is right up there with anywhere else in the world, and so is our rollout of the next generation network. We announced last year the $1.4 billion rollout of faster speeds, that new network, which is up and running from about the middle of this year.
Okay.
So we are right up with the play, and what we offer today is internationally competitive.
Many people say it's not. Many people say it's not. But one way you could solve this and get all your critics off your back and shut everyone up and be fondly regarded by all and sundry is unbundle. That is give everyone the same access to the loop that you guys enjoy.
Australia has unbundling, and the majority of customers there pay more for less than what is now available in New Zealand.
Yeah, but this is relatively new. Stuff's kicking in Australia, isn't it? For example, iNet, who are the parent company of iHug, can give you 24 megabits at about the same price that you guys are offering, much less in New Zealand.
It's just about living the telephone exchange, and this is where the rubber hits the road.
But it's the beginning, isn't it? It's the beginning.
And we will have those speeds in a few months as well.
Why don't you unbundle?
Our competitors want to cherry pick. They want to focus on high-value urban customers. They don't care about customers across New Zealand. It's about affordable broadband for all Kiwis.
They haven't enjoyed your advantages. They haven't signed up to the Kiwi share. Answer the question.
And they haven't spent $2 billion on the network that we've spent in the last 5 years.
And what?
We
and $2 billion on the network and $2 billion in dividends in the last 2 years. You guys aren't doing it too hard.
Our investment levels are right up with the play.
OK.
We've spent more on broadband infrastructure every year than the year before for the last few years.
Why won't you unbundle?
Because we already have an extensively regulated wholesale regime. It was put in place barely 18 months ago. It's working. Prices are coming down, speeds are going up, investment levels are happening, customer numbers are doubling. Why would you throw that out and start again?
Can you name someone else in New Zealand other than you and the Commerce Commission who thinks you shouldn't unbundle? Ernie Newman, 2ANZ, think you should unbundle. The Internet New Zealand people came out today, Colin Jackson and Keith Davidson, and said, we've got to unbundle. Well, the users, your competitors, all the people who've emailed us all say unbundle.
Well, first of all, people who are investing in infrastructure like Whoosh, who put $150 million into alternative technologies, certainly don't want it. But more to the point, less than 2 years ago, the Telecommunications Commission, which was set up as an independent, knowledgeable body, looked at this quite thoroughly and concluded that regulated wholesale was going to be more effective.
After extraordinary lobbying from you guys.
Look, they ran a very transparent process.
Extraordinary lobbying from you guys.
They ran a very transparent process. They always do. Of course, everyone lobbied. Everybody was part of that.
David Cunliffe is going to join us later in the show. Are you going to look me in the eyes now and say it is not in the government's best interest and it's not in the best interest of this country and internet users across the board for the government to initiate unbundling?
I do genuinely believe that. We do genuinely believe that.
Aren't you going to find yourselves presented with a fait accompli? Aren't you going to be seen as the recalcitrant, difficult people who are going to be compelled to do it? Isn't it better if you do it voluntarily?
Look, we're getting on. People think about Telecom as this faceless entity. It's not. It's 6,000 Kiwis who are passionate about serving New Zealanders. We're Kiwis. We want New Zealand to succeed. We believe in this stuff as well, and we are trying to demonstrate that we're getting on with it. People have said you only drop prices because the government started talking about it. That's not true. There are hundreds of people in Telecom who know that those new prices were locked and loaded for a launch early April because they've been working on it for some time. It is true that we brought that announcement forward, but even before this year, our residential prices were already right up with the play, and we are on the same time frame as many other companies and rolling out even faster speeds.
OK, Teresa Gatting, CEO of Telecom. I'm very sorry we didn't have time to talk about cell phone prices, but thank you very much indeed for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Teresa Gatting, CEO of Telecom. OK, lots to discuss there, particularly unbundling and where the government stands on it. David Cunliffe will join us after the break.
I'm very excited about Harrison Ford being on the show this week.
Right, lots to get through. David Cunliffe, Minister of Communications and Information Technology, joins us from Wellington. Minister, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, John.
We have a bit of a shambles here, don't we? We have an entrenched, big player who is still, in some respects, enjoying the fruits of a monopoly that is antiquated, and that is the Loop. We have tetchy newcomers who say, come on, this ain't competition. We have the industry in the form of people like 2ANZ and these guys who've issued an amazing statement today, Internet New Zealand, saying, unbundle. What are you guys going to do?
Well, John, you've heard the case for the prosecution, you've heard the case for the defence, and my job is to try to run the jury in a way that protects the interests of ordinary New Zealanders. And that jury is out right at the moment, crunching the numbers, looking at the benchmarks, hearing from the industry and the user groups, and trying to put together the best options that we can take through Cabinet in the near future.
What are the options? Can you discuss them?
Well, I can't really go into the options before the Cabinet process, John, but I can tell you a bit about what we think is wrong. In the first place, as we've heard, uptake is low, 22nd out of the 30 in the OECD. Investment levels are too low. As you mentioned, $2 billion in dividends paid out by the incumbent. In the last 2 years, about $1.3 billion in investment during that time, and that wasn't all wires to cabinets either.
Yeah.
Prices on average still too high, despite after some years of pressure from the commissioner that this government's set up. Telecom manages to drop its business broadband prices 30 to 90% the day before the Prime Minister's speech to Parliament. So, as Teresa said, some of that work has been in progress for a while, but the timing was no doubt helpful.
Look, look, I know you're relatively new in this job, but I want to put something to you. I have ferreted out, I'm just going to hold it up, the dear old Greens, Luddites, you know, what are they wearing, that stuff made out of reefer? Hemp. They put out a press release on the 27th of November 2001. Greens telecommunications spokesperson Sue Kedgley today said the Greens are deeply disappointed that the telecommunications bill does not remove Telecom's monopoly over the local copper wire network. The Greens got it 5 years ago. Why have you guys been so slow?
Because we don't have the luxury of calling the shots from the cheap seats. Well, that's not disrespectful to the Greens. The point is we're accountable for the results. And the cure has to be better than the disease. And that's why we have to look at the different prescriptions that are being taken around the world.
Very good answer, and you should be a lawyer. But I'm not sure you addressed the question. Have you succumbed to good lobbying by Telecom? Have you been bullied into timidity?
Hell no. Hell no. And if those people who are wondering that question, all I'd say is watch this space for the outcome of the review process around the middle of this year. Look, 2 years ago, the government considered a recommendation from the Telecommunications Commissioner. He said it was a line call, but on balance, unbundle the bit stream up to 128k. Telecom said they would cooperate with that. They said they'd get 250,000 wholesale connections, 250,000 total connections, a third of which would be wholesaled. Well, they got the 250k for the total. They didn't make the third, although they now argue about the target, and they certainly didn't cooperate with the UBS process. They pulled and pushed all the way through, threatened litigation, and that took far too long. So they had the opportunity then to demonstrate the sort of behaviour that ordinary New Zealanders want to see. And what ordinary New Zealanders are saying up and down the country is they've had a gutsful.
Okay.
And the government is not deaf to that.
Have you had a gutsful as the Minister?
As a Minister, I have had a gutsful with the status quo, yes. Something has to change.
Okay.
Now, there are various options, and we have to make sure that the change is positive, and that is what the process is about.
So you've had a gutsful of the Minister, as the Minister of the status quo. One would suggest that the Prime Minister did not make a point by accident in the House, so one can conclude
that's a fair guess.
That she has had a gutsful too. So in short, this government has had a gutsful and changes are in the wind?
Well, John, look, we are talking to all the players in the market, and those players have the opportunity to come and talk to us about their future plans should they wish. We are talking to the user groups, we are analysing what other countries are doing, and I'm taking papers to Cabinet that will result in decisions announced before the middle of the year.
David Cunliffe, we look forward to those decisions. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this evening. And that is our program for tonight. Thanks for watching, everyone. Ka kite. Good evening.
Chris parties like it's 1999. Everybody Hates Chris coming up next. Then our New Look Wednesday continues with My Name is Earl.
ASB, one step ahead.